The stale air of the courtroom pressed down on me, thick with the perfume of anticipation and the faint metallic tang of fear. My stomach churned, a nervous flutter, at even Julian's warm hand clasped in mine couldn't entirely quell. He squeezed gently, offering a silent reassurance. "It's almost over, Cass," he whispered, his voice a low rumble against the hushed backdrop of the courtroom. I nodded, trying to focus on his words, but my gaze kept drifting towards the opposing table. My father, Richard Johnson, sat ramrod straight, his face an impassive mask. Beside him, my sister, Sophia, fidgeted with the strap of her designer handbag, a smug smirk playing on her lips. They hadn't even glanced my way since I entered. "All rise," the bailiff barked, his voice echoing through the cavernous room. Judge Mallory, a stern-faced woman with steel-grey hair, entered and took her seat on the bench. The room fell silent. This was it. The culmination of years of hurt, betrayal, and relentless work. I, Cassandra Johnson, was here to reclaim what was rightfully mine. From family rejection to funding millions. Her sweet revenge. They had underestimated me, dismissed my ambitions, and stolen my rightful share in the company I'd helped build from the ground up. Now, I was here to prove them wrong. "We are here today for the case of Johnson versus Johnson," Judge Mallory announced, her voice crisp and clear. "Ms. Johnson, you may proceed with your opening statement." My lawyer, Miss Sterling, a formidable woman with a voice that could cut through granite, rose to her feet. "Your Honor, members of the jury," she began, her gaze sweeping across the room, "we are here today because my client, Miss Cassandra Johnson, a visionary entrepreneur, was unjustly deprived of her rightful share in a company she helped create. A company that, thanks to her tireless efforts and innovative ideas, is now worth over $8 million. I shifted in my seat, the weight of the number settling on my shoulders. $8 million. It felt surreal to hear it spoken aloud, a testament to the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the sheer grit it had taken to build my empire from the ashes of their betrayal. Miss Sterling continued, outlining the details of my involvement in the company, from its humble beginnings in our garage to its current status as a leading player in the tech industry. She described the countless hours I'd poured into developing the software that had become the cornerstone of our success. She spoke of the sacrifices I'd made, foregoing a normal social life, pushing myself to the brink of exhaustion, all in the pursuit of a dream I believed in. And yet, Ms. Sterling's voice hardened. Despite her integral role in the company's success, Ms. Johnson was unceremoniously stripped of her shares, her contributions dismissed and her future jeopardized by the very people who should have supported her own family. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. I could feel the jury's eyes on me, a mixture of curiosity and sympathy in their gazes. "We will demonstrate," Miss Sterling continued, "that Mr. Richard Johnson and Ms. Sophia Johnson acted in bad faith, deliberately undermining Ms. Cassandra Johnson's position in the company and enriching themselves at her expense." My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sophia, however, remained unmoved, her expression a mask of indifference. It was a familiar look, one that sent a shiver down my spine. I remembered the day they had told me, so casually, so cruelly, that my shares were being transferred to Sophia. My lawyer's voice snapped me back to the present. "Ms. Johnson," she said, turning to me, "can you tell the court what happened on the day you learned about the transfer of your shares?" I took a deep breath, the memories flooding back. I was called into my father's office. I began, my voice trembling slightly. He sat behind his large mahogany desk, looking disappointed. Sophia was there too, perched on the edge of a chair, filing her nails. I could almost smell the cloying scent of her expensive perfume filling the room. "He told me," I continued, swallowing hard, that they had decided to give my shares to Sophia. My voice cracked. He said I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. He said, "What, Ms. Johnson?" Miss Sterling prompted gently. He said, "We've given your shares to your sister. She needs them more." My voice was barely a whisper. The courtroom was silent. Even Judge Mary seemed to hold her breath. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of betrayal. I closed my eyes, the memory playing out in vivid detail. The condescending tone of my father's voice, the smug look on Sophia's face, the casual dismissal of my hard work, my dedication, my dreams. They had treated me like I was nothing, like my contributions were worthless. They had stolen my future, my security, my very sense of self. "And how did that make you feel, Ms. Johnson?" Ms. Sterling asked, her voice soft. I opened my eyes, meeting her gaze. "It felt," I said, my voice regaining some of its strength, "like being punched in the gut. It felt like everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, had been for nothing. Betrayed by family. She built an $8 million empire. I looked directly at my father and sister. It felt like they didn't even see me. The air in Grandpa Joe's study always smelled like old leather and pipe tobacco, a scent that clung to the heavy velvet curtains and the stacks of yellowed newspapers piled haphazardly in the corners. It was a suffocating scent, and on that day, it felt particularly oppressive. I was 14, awkwardly perched on the edge of a stiff-backed chair, my hands twisting in my lap. Across from me, my brother, Mark, lounged comfortably on the plush leather sofa, a smug grin plastered on his face. "So, Mark tells me you've been tinkering with computers again, Cassandra," Grandpa Joe said, his voice gravelly. He peered at me over his spectacles, the way he always did when he was about to deliver a lecture. "Yes, Grandpa," I mumbled, my cheeks burning. I'd spent weeks meticulously coding a simple game, painstakingly crafting each pixelated character and level. I was so proud of it, and I couldn't wait to show him. He took a long drag from his pipe, the smoke swirling around his head like a halo of disapproval. "A frivolous pursuit," he finally declared, tapping his pipe against the ashtray. "Mark here. He's got his head on straight, focusing on practical things." Mark puffed out his chest, the grin widening. "Yeah, Cass, computers are just toys. Real business is about deals, investments, actual money." But I started, my voice barely a whisper. I wanted to explain the logic, the creativity involved, the potential of this toy. But the words caught in my throat. "Mark," Grandpa Joe continued, ignoring my attempt to speak, "tells me he's interested in investing in that new car dealership downtown." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick wad of cash, the kind of casual display of wealth that always made my stomach churn. $5,000. To get you started, son. $5,000. It was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. My breath hitched. I'd been saving up my allowance for months, hoping to buy a new graphics card that would allow me to create even more complex games. I'd asked Grandpa Joe for a loan of just $200, promising to pay him back every penny. But he'd scoffed, telling me I needed to learn the value of hard work. "Thanks, Grandpa," Mark exclaimed, practically snatching the money from his hand. He didn't even try to hide his glee. He peeled off a $100 bill and waved it in my face. "Maybe I'll buy you a Barbie, Cass, something age-appropriate." The sting of his words was like a physical blow. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to do anything but sit there and take it. But years of being treated like the family's eccentric afterthought had conditioned me to swallow my anger, to shrink myself down, to become invisible. "Now, Cassandra," Grandpa Joe said, turning his attention back to me, his tone condescending. "I understand you've been asking your father for money as well." My father, a quiet man who rarely contradicted his own father, just nodded silently. Shame washed over me. I'd thought he might understand my passion, might see the potential in what I was doing. Clearly, I was wrong. "Your father works hard for his money," Grandpa Joe continued. "He can't just hand it out to you for every little whim." "It wasn't a whim," I whispered, my voice trembling. "It was an investment in my future." He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that made me flinch. "Your future is finding a good husband, Cassandra, not wasting your time with these gadgets." I looked from my grandfather to my father, then back again. Their faces held a mixture of pity and annoyance, as if I were a small child throwing a tantrum over a lost toy. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I stood up abruptly, knocking my chair over in the process. The loud clatter echoed in the otherwise silent room. They both stared at me, surprised by my sudden outburst. "You're right, Grandpa," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "It is an investment, and I'll make sure it pays off." I turned and walked out of the study, the stifling smell of leather and tobacco following me like a curse. I went straight to my room and closed the door behind me, leaning against it as if to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Tears streamed down my face, hot and angry. I pulled out the floppy disk containing my game, the product of weeks of dedicated work, and stared at it. It was more than just a game. It was a symbol of my passion, my ambition, my potential, and they had dismissed it, just like they dismissed me. That was the day I decided to prove them wrong. That was the day I withdrew every penny I had saved, every dollar I had earned from babysitting and odd jobs, and severed all financial ties with my family. I wouldn't ask them for another cent. I wouldn't rely on their handouts, their condescending pity, their narrow-minded view of what a woman's life should be. From family rejection to funding millions, her sweet revenge. I would build my own empire, brick by digital brick, and they would regret the day they underestimated me. The bitter taste of that memory, the sting of their dismissal, fueled my ambition for years to come. It was the fire that forged my resolve, the catalyst that propelled me forward. And as I sat there in the courtroom, years later, watching their faces contort with a mixture of shock and disbelief, I knew that this fire, the fire they had ignited with their dismissiveness, was about to burn them. The air in the room crackled with anticipation, thick with the smell of Aunt Mildred's infamous pot roast and something else, something I couldn't quite place. Nervousness, maybe, or was it the simmering resentment that always seemed to permeate family gatherings? I was 14, awkward and gangly, clutching a small, velvet box in my sweaty palms. Inside lay a silver locket, a gift I'd painstakingly saved for months of babysitting, dog walking, and even cleaning Mrs. Henderson's attic, a task that involved far more dust bunnies than anyone could reasonably expect. It was Amelia's 16th birthday, and I, ever the eager younger sister, wanted to make it special. "Amelia, open my next," I chirped, my voice a little too high-pitched. Amelia, resplendent in a new dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe combined, barely glanced at me. "In a minute, Cassie," she said, her eyes glued to the mountain of gifts piling up on the dining table. "I'm kind of busy here," my stomach twisted. Busy with unwrapping gifts, wasn't that the fun part? I watched as she tore through wrapping paper, revealing designer bags, expensive jewelry, and the latest tech gadgets. Each gift was met with squeals of delight and effusive thank yous, directed solely at our parents and extended family. "Look, Aunt Mildred got me a diamond tennis bracelet," she exclaimed, holding up her wrist. It glittered under the chandelier, a sharp contrast to the simple silver of the locket nestled in my hand. Aunt Mildred beamed. "You deserve it, my sweet girl. You're going to do great things." Amelia. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the familiar lump of disappointment. This was a recurring theme in our family. Amelia, the golden child, destined for greatness, and me. I was just Cassie. Amelia, remember Cassandra has a gift for you too, Mom reminded gently, a voice laced with a hint of apology directed at me. I knew she felt bad. Her words felt like a consolation prize. Amelia finally turned to me, a bored expression on her face. Oh yeah, Cass, let's see what interesting thing you found for me. Her tone dripped with condescension. My cheeks burned. I wanted to snatch the box back, to stuff it deep into my pocket and pretend it never existed. But I forced a smile and held it out to her. Happy birthday, Amelia, I mumbled, my voice barely a whisper. She took the box, her fingers brushing mine briefly. They felt cold, almost disinterested. She flipped open the lid and stared at the locket. It was a simple, heart-shaped pendant, engraved with a smaller. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't expensive, but it was given with love, a love I desperately wanted her to recognize. Silence. A long, excruciating silence that stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Amelia let out a small, derisive laugh. Really? Cassandra? A locket? How thoughtful. Her tone made it clear that she didn't mean it. My carefully chosen gift, the symbol of my affection, was being treated like a joke. The lump in my throat grew larger, threatening to choke me. It's silver, I stammered, trying to defend my choice. I saved up for it. Amelia rolled her eyes. Well, I appreciate the gesture, I guess, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, but it really doesn't match anything I own. She tossed the box carelessly onto the table, where it landed amongst the discarded wrapping paper and ribbons. The room erupted in laughter. Aunt Mildred, Uncle George, even my own parents chuckled at Amelia's dismissal of my gift. The sound was like a physical blow, each chuckle a tiny shard of glass piercing my already wounded heart. I felt my eyes well up, but I refused to cry. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. It's beautiful, Cassandra, Mum said, her voice soft. I knew she meant well, but her words felt hollow, empty. They couldn't erase the sting of Amelia's rejection, the humiliation of being publicly ridiculed by my own family. I forced a smile, a tight, painful grimace that felt more like a grimace than a genuine expression. It's okay, I mumbled, my voice barely audible above the dwindling laughter. I'm glad she likes it. I excused myself and fled to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. Leaning against the sink, I finally let the tears fall. They streamed down my face, hot and heavy, a mixture of anger, hurt, and a deep, knowing sense of injustice. It wasn't just about the locket. It was about everything. The constant favoritism, the casual dismissals, the feeling that I was always second best, a shadow in Amelia's radiant light. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The image of the discarded locket burned into my mind. I vowed then and there that I would never again put myself in a position to be humiliated like that. I would prove them wrong. I would show them that I was worth more than their dismissive laughter. I would build something of my own, something they couldn't ignore, something that would force them to finally see me, not as the awkward younger sister, but as Cassandra Johnson, a force to be reckoned with, from family rejection to funding millions. My sweet revenge. They stole my shares, they stole my apathy, but they couldn't steal my determination, and they certainly couldn't steal my future. The fluorescent lights of the courtroom hummed, a dull counterpoint to the frantic beating of my heart. My lawyer, Miss Stern, squeezed my hand reassuringly. You've got this, Cassandra. I nodded, trying to project an air of calm I definitely didn't feel. My family, seated across the aisle, looked like a tableau of smug indifference. My father, steely-eyed and impassive. My stepmother, Deborah, whispering to my half-brother, Ethan, a smirk playing on his lips. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully stripped me of my rightful share of the company I built. They underestimated me, from family rejection to funding millions. Her sweet revenge. That's what this was all about, Your Honor. Miss Stern addressed the judge, her voice crisp and clear. We'd like to call our next witness Mr. David Chen. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. David, my old college professor, mentor, and the one person who truly believed in me when my own family didn't. He walked towards the stand, a calm, reassuring presence in the chaotic room. He swore in, his hand steady on the Bible. Mr. Chen, Ms. Stern began. Can you tell the court your relationship to the plaintiff, Cassandra Johnson? Cassandra was a student in my advanced algorithms class at Stanford, he replied, his voice carrying clearly across the room. She quickly distinguished herself as one of the most brilliant and innovative students I've ever had the pleasure of teaching. My father shifted in his seat, a first crack in his compose facade. He hadn't expected this. None of them had. They thought my college years were just a frivolous waste of time, a period of youthful indiscretion before I settled into a suitable career. They never understood the fire that burned within me, the relentless drive to create something of my own. Can you elaborate, Mr. Chen? Ms. Stern prompted. Cassandra possessed a unique combination of technical prowess and entrepreneurial vision. David continued. She wasn't content with simply understanding the theory. She wanted to apply it, to build something real, something that could change the world. He went on to describe the project I developed in his class, the very seed of what would later become my $8 million empire. The algorithm I designed, the late nights I spent coding, the sheer tenacity I displayed in the face of setbacks. Every word he spoke was a validation, a testament to the dedication they had so readily dismissed. Did Ms. Johnson ever discuss her family's involvement in her entrepreneurial pursuits? Ms. Stern asked, her voice sharp. Yes, David answered. She often expressed frustration that her family didn't understand her work. They saw it as a hobby, not a viable career path. He paused, his gaze sweeping across my family. They seemed more interested in her pursuing her more traditional, in their view, stable profession. I could feel Deborah's eyes boring into me, sharp and accusatory. She always believed I was trying to prove something, to outshine her precious Ethan. She couldn't comprehend that my drive wasn't about competition. It was about passion, about bringing my vision to life. Ms. Stern presented David with a copy of my old college project proposal, the document outlining the core technology that formed the basis of my company. He confirmed it was my work, his voice unwavering. This document, Ms. Stern addressed the judge, clearly demonstrates Ms. Johnson's ownership of the core intellectual property that her family now claims as their own. My father's face finally registered a flicker of unease. He had always underestimated me, dismissing my passion as childish ambition. He thought he could manipulate me, exploit my loyalty, and steal the fruits of my labor. He was wrong. The courtroom was hushed, everyone hanging on David's every word. He recounted a specific incident, a meeting I had with my father during my junior year. I had excitedly pitched him my business idea, eager for his support and guidance. He had listened patiently, then dismissed it with a condescending chuckle. Software, he'd scoffed. That's not a real business, Cassandra. You need to focus on something practical. David's testimony continued, painting a clear picture of my dedication and innovation, contrasted with my family's dismissive attitude. He described how I persevered despite their lack of support, working tirelessly to turn my vision into reality. Did Ms. Johnson ever mention her intentions regarding the ownership of her company? Ms. Stern asked, her voice carefully neutral. Yes, David replied. She always maintained that it was her independent creation, built through her own hard work and ingenuity. She never wavered in her belief that she was the sole owner. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, a stark indictment of my family's greed and betrayal. They thought they could erase my contributions, rewrite history to suit their narrative. They thought they could silence me. But I wouldn't be silenced. I had found my voice, and I would use it to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Ms. Stern turned to address the judge. Your Honor, we believe Mr. Chen's testimony unequivocally establishes Ms. Johnson's sole ownership of the core technology underlying her company. The judge nodded, his gaze fixed on the document in his hand. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. My family sat frozen, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. The smirk had vanished from Ethan's face, replaced by a look of dawning apprehension. Deborah's eyes, no longer sharp, now darted nervously around the room. My father stared straight ahead, his face pale and drawn. The silence stretched on, each tick of the clock amplifying the anticipation. This was it. The turning point. The moment everything changed. The moment they realized they had underestimated me, miscalculated my resolve. They had betrayed me, and now the truth was finally coming to light. We will adjourn for the day, the judge announced, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. Court will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The gavel fell with a resounding crack, shattering the tense stillness. The battle wasn't over, but I knew, deep down, that I had finally gained the upper hand. They had stolen my shares. They had tried to steal my voice. But I stole their apathy, and now they were finally paying attention. The mahogany of the judge's desk gleamed under the courtroom lights, a vast, polished expanse separating me from my family. They sat huddled together on the other side, their faces a mixture of apprehension and defiance. My father, his jaw clenched, avoided my gaze. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, a performance I'd seen countless times before. My brother, Mark, the golden child, stared straight ahead, a smirk playing on his lips. From family rejection to funding millions, her sweet revenge, the courtroom artist whispered to his colleague, sketching furiously. I swallowed, the lump in my throat refusing to budge. It was finally here, the day I'd envisioned for years. The date they'd pay for everything. All rise. The bailiff called, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. Judge Thompson entered, her face impassive. She settled into her chair and surveyed the room, her gaze lingering on me for a moment before moving on. Be seated, she instructed, her voice crisp and authoritative. My lawyer, Miss Stern, a formidable woman with steel-grey hair and eyes that could cut glass, squeezed my hand reassuringly. Ready, she whispered. Ready, I reply, my voice steadier than I felt. Judge Thompson addressed the court. In the matter of Johnson versus Johnson, regarding the disputed ownership of SynthFlow, we are here to deliver the final verdict. She paused, letting her words hang in the air. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, she continued, the court finds in favor of my breath hitched. This was it. The plaintiff, Cassandra Johnson. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. My mother let out a wail, burying her face in my father's shoulder. Mark's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stern disbelief. My father's face turned a shade of purple I'd never seen before. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Ms. Stern smiled, a rare and genuine smile. Congratulations, Cassandra, she whispered, patting my hand. The judge continued, her voice clear and unwavering. Furthermore, she said, her gaze sweeping across my family, The court orders the immediate return of all misappropriated shares of Sinsflow to Ms. Johnson, along with all profits accrued during the period of unlawful possession. I closed my eyes, a wave of relief washing over me. It was over. I had won. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had completely misjudged me. They thought they could steal my dream, my company, my future. They thought they could crush me, but I had risen from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever. Betrayed by family, she built an $8 million empire. Those words echoed in my mind, a testament to my resilience, my perseverance, my triumph. But that's not all, Judge Thompson said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. This caught even Ms. Stern by surprise. She leaned forward, her expression focused. During the course of this trial, the judge continued, evidence has come to light regarding the questionable financial practices of Mr. Robert Johnson and Mr. Mark Johnson in their management of the Johnson Family Trust. She paused, allowing the gravity of her words to sink in. My father's face drained of color. Mark looked like he was about to be sick. Based on this evidence, Judge Thompson announced, the court has no choice but to freeze the Johnson Family Trust assets pending a full investigation. She looked directly at my father and brother. Gentlemen, she said, her voice laced with steel, you are to report to the court clerk immediately following these proceedings to arrange for the transfer of all relevant financial documents. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension. My father finally found his voice, but it was a choked, desperate plea. Your Honor, there must be some mistake. We've done nothing wrong. Judge Thompson remained unmoved. That, she said coldly, is for the investigation to determine. The gavel fell, the sound echoing through the silent courtroom. It was the sound of finality, the sound of justice. It was the sound of my victory. I looked across at my family, their faces etched with shock and despair. The smirk was gone from Mark's face, replaced by a look of pure terror. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably. My father stared blankly ahead, his shoulders slumped in defeat. As I left the courtroom, flanked by Ms. Stern and Julian, my fiancé, the flashing cameras of the press momentarily blinded me. Reporters shouted questions, their voices a cacophony of sound. I didn't answer. I just kept walking, my head held high, a small, triumphant smile playing on my lips. I had not only reclaimed my company, but I had exposed the rot that had festered within my family for years. The truth was finally out. Later that evening, back at my apartment, Julian wrapped me in a tight embrace. You did it, Cassie, he whispered, his voice filled with pride. You did it. I leaned into his embrace, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. It's over, I said, my voice trembling slightly. It's finally over. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I thought back to the day my father had told me I was worthless, that I would never amount to anything. I thought back to all the times my family had belittled me, mocked me, dismissed me. And I smiled. They had been so wrong, so incredibly wrong. I had turned their doubts into dollars, their rejection into resolve. I had built an empire from the ashes of their betrayal. And now, they were paying the price. The next morning, a package arrived. Inside was a single, yellowed envelope, addressed to me in my grandmother's familiar handwriting. My grandmother, who had always believed in me, even when no one else did. She had passed away a few years earlier, before I'd even started Sinsflow. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. My dearest Cassandra, it began. I know your family doesn't always appreciate your brilliance, your drive, your unwavering spirit. They are blind to your potential, to the incredible woman you are destined to become. That is why I'm leaving you something that I hope will help you achieve your dreams. It's not much, but it's yours. Use it wisely. I believe in you, Cassandra. Never forget that. Beneath the letter was a check, A check for $5 million. Seed money for Sinsflow, the very company my family had tried to steal from me. My grandmother, in her quiet, unwavering way, had given me the foundation upon which I had built my empire. And now, with the court's decision, I had not only reclaimed what was rightfully mine, but I had gained so much more. The final, bittersweet irony wasn't lost on me. They had tried to take everything from me, and in the process, they had lost everything themselves. My victory was complete.